Decided that I am going to ditch making Instagram posts from here on out. So I'm gonna go live every single day, maybe not on Sundays, but I'm gonna be bringing you guys some sort of training on nutrition, on fat loss, on motivation, on mindset, something like that every single day. It seems like that's what you guys are wanting, so I'm super stoked to start doing that on a daily basis. So today, what we're gonna be doing is I'm gonna be, in this nutrition training today, what I'm gonna be talking about is really the most insidious impact on fat storage, okay? And it's something that a lot of people really don't understand, and they really need to get, it's important that you get a really good handle on this, and especially women, right? Especially women who are really stressed or entering menopause, their menopause period where estrogen and progesterone are suppressed. And then you have, extra impacts of, stress hormones, which is the detrimental cause of fat storage, okay? And that's really the combination of like fat and carbohydrates together is the worst combination, right? And so you might say, well, what are we talking about here? These are things that, we're talking about, like things like French fries and potato chips and chocolate, and sugar and fat, combined. Things like bagels with cream cheese, pizza, burgers, basically any kind of high fat food combined with a high starch food, a high carb food, okay? So these are, a lot of the foods that we love, right? It's the stuff that really tastes good. And it's really interesting because women, a lot of times, don't necessarily gravitate to that kind of stuff as much as men do, but, many women still need to be on the lookout for this, men seem to, from my experience at least, they're like notorious for wanting to sit down and just have like nothing but pizza and burgers and beer all the time, right? And then women, on the other hand, they get into trouble in other ways. Usually, they're doing something like, bread and butter, crackers and cheese, maybe bagels and cream cheese, or chips and dip, and things like that. And these things are really the worst possible combination for fat loss, okay? And that's what we're gonna be talking about. So this is important to understand, right? Because then you may understand when you start choosing your cheat meals or whatever, any kind of meals, why you want to possibly begin to not mix and match the protein or the carb and the fat together. So in other words, if you're going to have a high fat meal, then you're going to want to stick with all high fat and reduce the amount of carbs in that meal. And also, if you're going to have a very high carb meal, then you're going to want to avoid some of the fat in the carbohydrate meal. Okay, so we're trying to avoid the combination of them. And one of the things that really gets women in trouble, at least from my experience again, is ice cream, right? And men too, but women more so than the men. Because men like the burgers and the pizza and that kind of thing, and women tend to go for the ice cream, okay? And that's just kind of like what they tend to want. And it's just one of those comfort foods, and it's probably the most detrimental food, right? Because of the fat and the carbohydrates in ice cream, okay? And so you might say, well, why is ice cream so detrimental? Or really sort of the combination so detrimental? And it's because it elicits a very profound hormonal response that leads to fat storage, okay? And so, a lot of you guys have probably heard about the hormone insulin, but there's other hormones as well that cause your body to store fat, okay? And so one of them is, like the stimulating ASP hormone, and then the other is a GIP hormone. You don't really need to know the name at all, but it's a powerful stimulator of fat gain, okay? And it is released by fat. And you may or may not know that, insulin is primarily released by carbs, okay? But here's the thing, when you add fat on top of carbs, you get even a more insulin response, more insulin release, okay? And you get this ASP and GIP release as well. So it's really almost like a fat storing atomic bomb when you combine fat and carbohydrates together, okay? So this doesn't mean that you can't do ice cream, or you can never have burgers, or you can never have pizza, but it is important to understand how to manipulate these foods when you find yourself eating out with friends and family and coworkers, and going to social events and stuff like that. You want to keep this stuff in mind. So here's an example of this, okay? So let's say you go to a coworkers get together and they brought all the food and you're super hungry, and let's say they've got hot dogs, like little fatty hot dogs and little fatty sausages, and maybe they got some cold cuts, and you see pasta salad, and that's mixed with a bunch of cheese, and you see other things that are on the plate. What are you gonna go for? Like that's you want to start to have a plan when you go into these situations. Well, what you go for is first you always, hands down, always go for protein, and you always go for fiber first, right? Stuff like meats and cold cuts and veggies, or salad with little to no dressing on it. But let's say there's none of that, right? It's just junk food kind of, okay? Then what do you go for? So then you're like, all right, protein and fiber is out, right? Then you're gonna wanna go for either fat itself or for carbs itself, okay? And so fat itself would be like things like cheeses, pepperonis, maybe olives, stuff like that, right? And then if they, and then they might have like higher carb options. So higher carb, lower fat options. So stuff like low fat crackers, some bread, maybe some pasta. But you want to be staying away from like pigs in a blanket, bagels and cream cheese, and chips and dip, the donuts, the cookies, the cakes, okay? And the reason is because those things are going to be things that really elicit this hormonal fat storing response, okay? So knowing this, you can kind of have a very good game plan when you assess what you can eat, right? The first thing you say is, okay, first thing I'm looking for is protein and fiber, right? And then after that, let's say there's no protein and fiber options, then you're gonna go for high carb foods that are low in fat. Let's say there's none of that, then you would go for high fat foods that are low in carb, okay? And really those two things is kind of be like, which one do you choose first? It's probably gonna be dependent on you and like what satisfies you and satiates you, what keeps you the fullest and satisfies you the longest, okay? And so this may be a little confusing for you because you may have heard that, fat slows down the glycemic index of foods. In other words, if you have fat with carbs, you're gonna slow the release of that blood sugar into your body, right? And that's actually true. And for people who are diabetic or, very obese, you may wanna move that around a little bit, okay? Because they're dealing with a very different metabolism. You may want to go, for those kind of people, you may want to go fat first and then fat and carb together, and then carbohydrates at the very end is how you'd structure that. But that's only because their metabolism is such that if you get too much sugar in the body too quickly, that can cause problems for them, okay? However, most people, you're still going to have to deal with all that blood sugar and all that insulin and all that extra fat, and that combination brings me to my second point here, okay? So, and my second point is, that the combination of fat and carbs, those are gonna be the foods that have the highest amount of calories out of any foods around, okay? So not only is it going to cause more fat storage, they're also higher in calorie. Things like, fries and pizza, burgers, chips, sandwiches with a lot of mayo. Really trail mix and that kind of stuff. Just drowning in high fat and carbohydrates, breaded chicken, fried chicken, stuff like that. Okay, and so those things are going to be the absolute worst combination, even if it's quoted as healthy, like avocado toast, right? You got the fat plus the bread. That's the combination, right? So remember, it's not just about calories. It's also about hormones, but calories still matter. And the very worst thing that you can have happen is this improper hormonal effect, which fat and carbs together gives you a huge amount of calories coming along with this sort of fat storing bomb effect, okay? So that is, that may be a little confusing for you, but here's how it works for you. If you're diabetic or you have blood sugar issues, then maybe you want to have a little bit of fat with your carbs. But in general, you just want to either go high fat and low carb or high carb and low fat and avoid the combinations together, all right? So, and the interesting thing that brings me to my third point here is about negative health, okay? It's really interesting because if you look at diets like the Atkins diet, which is pretty much all fat, right? And no carbs. And then you look at vegan-based diets, which is very low in fat but very high in carbs. Well, you see these health benefits in both of them. And one of the reasons that that's the case is because these two diets, the vegan and the vegetarian diets, they have no fat. And the Atkins diet has no carbs. And they essentially avoid this detrimental combination of the fat and carbohydrate, right? And so here's the thing that you want to remember, and the whole point of this nutrition training today is that you really want to go for protein first, right? Protein and veggies. If that's not there, then go to high carb, low fat. That's not there, then go to high fat, low carb. And which one of those, like high, carb or fat is going to be dependent on you. But, when you go out, you're going to want to think about this kind of stuff, right? And when you're ordering, you find yourself, hanging out with friends and, you're hungry and you haven't eaten in a while. You need to come up with something to eat. Protein and veggies will be first, your best bet. So that would look like a burger with the bun stripped off or fried chicken with the skin stripped off. And then the next option would be high carb, low fat. So things like rice, potato, low fat crackers, bread, things like that. That would be, and then the next thing would be high fat, low carb. Things like cheeses, pepperonis, things that are low in carb but higher in fat. Or pizza with the bread thrown away and you're just eating the cheese and the tomato sauce off the top, okay? So these are the kind of things that you can do. Is this ideal? Absolutely not, okay? But you need to remember, or you need to know how to manage this kind of situation, right? Like you got a chicken biscuit or a sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit. You take off the bun, throw that off. You're essentially is what you're doing is getting rid of the carbs. And you're just going to eat the fat, or vice versa. Okay, so you can always manipulate it, so that you're not getting the combination. Okay, same with let's say pasta primavera or toast without the fat, or wheat cereal with skim milk. Things like that are very low in fat but high in carbs. So, and hopefully those carbs actually have a lot of fiber in them too. So that's the things that you're going to want to keep in mind. But cheesecake, ice cream, things like that, you're just going to want to keep that at the very minimal, unless it's like a cheat meal, right? Or reward meal, okay? Then it's like a different situation, something that you've been planning for, and it's time to just kind of let go. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys in understanding, what the most detrimental thing for fat loss is, and probably the most detrimental, thing for fat loss. Across the board, I'm always telling people to just kind of avoid the combinations. And again, that's why Atkins and vegan diets have done so well, because it takes that combination really out, okay? That fat storing atomic bomb. And so those kind of things should be avoided at all costs, except for reward meals, okay? It's just a great concept to understand, so that when you're going out to eat, you feel like you're in control of the food and you can make good choices regardless of what shows up, okay? So hopefully you guys like that. I'm gonna be getting on here every single day. Also, I just announced that I'm doing a live webinar for you guys this Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Get registered for that. It's limited seating or reservation, so get on that. You got to go to www.livewithnat.com, www.livewithnat.com, enter your email address, reserve your seat, and I'm going to be covering in there my 5 keys, my 5 secrets to getting a body that reflects your hard work in the gym without the freaking obsessiveness and neuroticness around the gym and food, okay? My goal for you guys is for you to have a body you love, right? That is representing all the hard work you do in the gym, and yet not being obsessive about it, right? And I want you to wake up. I want you to wake up being excited to work out, not feeling like you have to work out. That is my goal for you, because if we can do that, we can do that forever, right? And that's what I want. So check that out, www.livewithnat.com to register for my webinar. It's this Thursday, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.